Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Great Leadership. My guest today goes by VG. He is a professor of management at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. He's in the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame. He's the best-selling author of several books, including the Three-Box Solution and a brand new book called Fusion Strategy: How Real-Time Data and AI Will Power the Industrial Future. And today we're going to be talking about a few different things. One, we're going to introduce the concept of fusion and what it is, and there are some components around that, such as data graphs, what those are, why they are important. We're going to be looking at how leadership is changing based on technology, the future of competition, and this new business landscape that's going to be fueled by a lot of technology and AI. We'll also get into the balance between humanity and technology, a couple examples of fusion today, and how to actually measure success. And then towards the last 15-20 minutes in the Leaders Toolkit section, we're going to go over some specific steps and strategies that you can use in these four different battlegrounds, and we'll go in depth into what those steps are. So having said all that, VG, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be part on the show.
Yeah, your book is very timely. There's a lot of conversation happening, of course, in the AI and the tech space, of course, with things like ChatGPT and Grok and so many different platforms out there. I had Chris Miller on the show fairly recently where we were talking about semiconductors and the battle between the United States and our reliance on semiconductors in China and Taiwan. Lots of fun stuff. Why don't we start high level with what this concept of fusion actually is, and why is it something that we should be paying attention to in today's business landscape?
Let us step back for a moment and think about, say, mid-80s. At MIT, which is the natural place, they will ask faculty to do research on technology topics. They asked faculty to take on a revolutionary research topic, which was how would information technology, we didn't call it digital at that time, how would information technology affect the world of business and the discipline of management? By the way, we are asking the same question in the year 2024. How would digital technologies affect the world of business and the discipline of management? But the context is vastly different. In the mid-80s, when we asked this question, the best piece of hardware we had was IBM PC with a green screen, which is probably in some museum somewhere now. The best piece of software we had was Lotus 123. We didn't know anything about internet. We didn't know anything about mobile. We didn't know anything about Gen AI. We didn't know anything about VR, AR, etc. Clearly, information technology had a huge impact in the 80s, 90s, and even the first decade of this century. Huge impact. But there are two differences between the impact information technology had in the 80s, 90s versus what digital is doing today. And the two differences being, the first is information technology essentially was about process reengineering in the 80s and 90s. Businesses formulated strategy, and then information technology was a support function, which automated supply chain, automated accounting, made the processes efficient. This is the big investments in SRP, ERP, SAP, etc. Today, digital is affecting strategy itself. Google is changing the strategy in advertising in the last 15 years. That is one big difference. The second big difference is information technology in the 80s hugely impacted business, but had practically no impact on individuals. The way we lived, the way we played, the way we transacted, the way we did work wasn't impacted by digital. We still came to office. We weren't doing a Zoom call. We still transacted in person with paper currency. What has happened in 2004 is digital is everywhere.
Yeah.
It is impacting individuals in a profound way, the way we live, the way we listen to music, the way we pay, etc. The reason this is very important is I did take a look at the market cap of the top 10 companies in the world in January 2007. And the reason I chose that date was iPhone was not introduced at that time.
Ah, okay.
And the top 10 companies happened to be in 2007 all physical asset companies, with the exception of one, Microsoft. The rest were manufacturing companies like Toyota, General Electric, or big oil companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, etc. You take a look at the same list today. All the 10 companies are tech companies. Microsoft is also on the list, but Microsoft today is different than Microsoft in 2007. The reason I'm pointing this out is in the last 17 years, digital companies have changed the rules of the game in what I call asset-light consumer sector, like music, media, entertainment, publishing, etc. All that these digital companies did was to digitize the consumer sector. And they digitized it based on one single technology called smartphones. Because using smartphones, they collected data on how we shop, how we listen to music, how we pay, etc. And as consumers, we gave permission to these companies to collect that data because we quickly check that box, I agree, so that we can get to the app. The reason this is terribly important is all that we have digitized so far in the last 16 years is information goods like Google or analog products which completely became digital like camera. Think about the value and wealth we have created. These companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Tesla, these are trillions of dollars of value got created. By the way, these digital companies are very different than the IT companies in the 80s and 90s. These are not Lucent, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Dell. This is new class of companies which change strategy itself. But they have changed the strategy in consumer sector.
Yeah.
And by the way, the world's GDP today is $100 trillion. Out of the $100 trillion, only 25% is in the consumer sector.
Wow.
So we have essentially digitized $25 trillion. The next game is to digitize the industrial sector, which is $75 trillion. That is what Fusion Strategy book is all about. And that is going to happen in the next 25 years. The reason we use Fusion Strategy is the physical product cannot be digitized completely. A tractor will not become digital. You still need a tractor. But the value will migrate from physical assets to data and AI. Therefore, it is this marriage between data and AI and physical assets is the next battleground. And that is what the book is all about.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so it's blending the digital, it's blending the physical. And what was the third component in there that you said it's blending?
AI.
AI. So digital, physical, and AI, you have AI as a separate component besides digital.
I would put data and AI as digital.
Okay. So basically, physical and digital is kind of the marrying of the two things.
Yeah.
Now, in the book, one of the things that you talk about is this concept of data graphs. And I think that kind of sets the tone for some of the other things that we want to talk about. So can you explain what a data graph actually is and why that's so important?
I think we need to think about, in the last 16 years, think about the traditional camera companies. They all disappeared. We got new classes of companies, digital players which take photographs. Traditional music companies, Warner Music, Columbia, they disappeared. We have new class of music companies, Spotify and Amazon Music and Apple Music. Traditional movie studios, they disappeared or in serious trouble. We have new players like Netflix, etc. Now, when you analyze how these digital companies vanquished B2C consumer sector, it is based on this notion of data graph. What I mean by that is the printed newspaper companies did not know what the consumer was reading in real time. Whereas at TikTok or Twitter, which is X now, or Facebook, Google, which also in the information business, they track what we read every time we read something. Similarly, the traditional taxi companies, the traditional auto companies didn't know how we drove the car every day. They only knew the number of cars they sold. They didn't know what the consumer did with the car every day. That's what Tesla does. Now, data graph is different from big data. This is not big data. This is smart data. Data graph is about product in use data, whereas most companies have product as sold. Data graph is real-time data. Therefore, it is dynamic. Whereas most companies have historical data, how many cars we sold. Whereas data graph, think about a company like Netflix, it is in real time tracking what we watch, in what device we watch. Do we pause, rewind and rewatch, or stop a show in between? Or when the movie that you want is not there, you want a Sylvester Stallone's Rambo, it's not there, then they give recommendations. Did you follow their recommendation? Or you switched off to some other channel. Everything is a piece of information for them.
Do you want to hear something really crazy? 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed. Help me change that number around by subscribing so that you can get access to more videos just like this one. And now let's get back to the content. So maybe one of the pioneers in that space was Waze, right? Because they
absolutely,
I would imagine, and I had the founder of that on the podcast a little while ago too. Because to your point, one of the things that they did is they used real-time data to make sense of what's going on in terms of traffic. And I think they're probably one of the early companies probably that used data graphs as a way to make sense of that. But yes, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, which I think they say changes the products that you see all the time. They change their homepage all the time, constantly testing. Maybe YouTube is another good example of that. Social media platforms, all of those would probably fall into the data graph bucket, I'm guessing.
I think the earliest company was Google.
Google
introduced knowledge graph as a concept, which is what I call data graph. By the way, if you think about it, we had physical library. And physical library had different categories. History books, travel books, fiction, non-fiction, business, etc. Google is nothing more than a library, which is organized data in different buckets. But here is the difference. In a physical library, if I went to the library and looked at 20 books in history and then decided to withdraw one book, the librarian knew the book that I withdrew on that day. Whereas Google knows I perused 20 books before I picked the book I chose. A week later, if I came to the physical library and started looking at travel section and looked at 50 travel books and then pulled the book on travel to Uzbekistan, the librarian knows I took Uzbekistan travel guide that day. He doesn't know I came a week earlier and was looking at history books. What Google does is every time you do a search, by the way, the day Google opened its search graph, they had categorized 350 million different entities. This will be like history books, this book, that book. 350 million different entities. By the way, graph is a concept we are used to in high school algebra. Graph is nothing more than a relationship between two variables, x and y. Data graph is finding a relationship between 350 million variables. You can't do it in paper and pencil. You can do it only with the computing power we have, only with the artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities we have. That is why Google was a pioneer in data graph. And once you have data graph, I am tracking product in use for every customer across these 350 million entities. And then they have another concept called data network effects, which is I am comparing your search with 2 billion people who search on Google. Therefore, my data graph scale and scope is exponential. And then I create communities of readers who are similar. Therefore, next time when you come to search, even if you just punch in Jaguar, it knows whether you are talking about animal or Jaguar car or Jaguar as an NFL team based on your own search before. And because they have data network effects, they can give you all kinds of hyper-personalized recommendation to an individual customer based on collective learning across customers. This is the concept of data graph. Data graph is the cornerstone on which they apply artificial intelligence techniques to analyze the data graph. And data graph, because they have it at scale and scope, and it is based on every interaction customer has with your product. This is why Netflix, Amazon are so dominant. I cannot start an online retail company and compete with Amazon today because nobody will come to VG.com because Amazon has collected so much data graph. And their advantage is data graph advantage.
Yeah, I love that way of thinking about it. It's such an interesting concept. So what does this mean for how competition is going to change? You know, a lot of people listening and watching to this might be thinking, well, that's interesting, but why is that relevant to me? Right? You know, I'm a manager at a company or I'm an employee at a company. How is this going to impact the way that I do business, the way I interact with the customers, the way I sell, the way I build products and services? So what does this mean for companies out there and for leaders out there who are looking to compete in this new world?
Huge impact, because value is migrating from physical products to insights. When it migrates like that, then a company which masters data graph, masters analyzing the data graph through AI, can expand the scope of the firm in many, many different directions and come to compete with you. Because Walmart and Amazon compete in retail.
Yep.
But Walmart doesn't make movies. Amazon does. This is the interesting part. What right Amazon has to come into movie business is an interesting question. But in fact, if you take a look at Amazon, they make movies. They make not just software, they make hardware, Kindle, and compete with Apple. Apple is not in retail business, but they compete with Apple. And then they get into grocery business with Whole Foods and compete with Costco and Kroger, etc. Amazon is the most unfocused company in the world. They're in grocery, they're in retail, they're in financial services, they're in music, they bought Ring, which is in smart home
Healthcare, did
space.
they buy or invest in One Medical as well? I think they're in health.
One Medical, that means they're in healthcare.
Yeah.
Then they're the biggest investor in Rivian. They're in electric vehicles. You take a look at the portfolio of those companies. I teach strategy. In the past, the first lesson I give in strategy is focus, focus, focus. Amazon is the most unfocused company. Maybe Jeff Bezos didn't attend that strategy class. But the real point is Amazon is a very focused company. If you think of it as a data and AI company. The moment you think of it as a data and AI company, they're very focused. Using that focus, they change the nature of their business. This is what John Deere should do. This is what Honeywell should do. This is what General Motors should do. General Motors should think of themselves as a data and AI company, which happen to make automobiles today. If you are John Deere, you are a data and AI company, you happen to make tractors, because suddenly you will face competition from Amazon. You'll face competition from IBM, because they will use data and AI to solve farmers' problems. And therefore, you must expand your set of competitors from your traditional competitors to these new competitors. You should expand your scope on competencies from hardware to software, from economies of scale to economies of expertise. So basically, the nature of the firm is John Deere a farm equipment company? Is that what they are? Or are they in precision agriculture? The moment you say you're in precision agriculture, then you're going to have different set of competitors.
Yeah.
You need different competencies. This is why I say every company by year 2050 will become a data and AI company. Just like the way in the consumer sector, the digital players have essentially disrupted the consumer giants by making themselves as a data and AI company. They come into financial services, they come into movies, they come into newspaper information. They will do the same thing to industrial companies if industrial companies ignore them.
Yeah.
That is why they have to take them seriously.
I wanted to talk about these four battlegrounds, and maybe we can expand on each one of them. So we have the battle for brilliant machines, the race for remarkable results, the showdown of smart systems, and the clash of custom solutions. So maybe we can spend a minute on each one of those. Let's start off with the battle for brilliant machines. I think a lot of people could probably wrap their minds around what we're talking about there.
Yeah. I think the battle for brilliant machines is to move from analog product to a fusion product. That means your product is able to remotely track product in use data in real time. Thereby, it is able to do predictive maintenance on your product. That's what a fusion product does. A fusion product is able to essentially do predictive maintenance. This is what Tesla is so good at. And that predictive maintenance can be done over the air. You don't even have to go to a dealer. I own a Tesla. Once I drove it to New York and some red lights came. I immediately pulled on the highway, texted the Tesla service center. He brought my car on his computer screen. After all, it is a computer on wheels or apps on wheels. Therefore, he is able to bring it. And he told me there is a bit of a rattling problem on the driver's door. That's why the lights are coming. Not to worry. They are going to send you a software update to adjust the hydraulics in the door. In 5 minutes, the red light should disappear. Wow. It did disappear. I left. Contrast this with an analog product.
No.
Analog product, if you're driving an analog car, the red lights will come. Then you pull on the highway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you start looking at which is the closest dealer for this General Motors car. Then you call the tow company to tow your car to the dealer. And the dealer may be closed or may not be ready to take your car because he's busy. He'll say, come tomorrow. Then you rent a car and go to New York, do your work, come tomorrow. He'll give you $1,000 bill.
Yeah.
Whereas Tesla is able to solve predictive maintenance problem in real time. Just like the way Amazon solves it in real time, they solve. That's the fusion product.
Yeah, Tesla's a very good example of that. I mean, I don't even think of them like as a car company. I think of them as a, software company on wheels. They frequently, every few weeks, there's a software update that happens to my car. I have a Tesla as well. And it's just really amazing to see, just like a computer that has software updates, the Tesla gets software updates as well, which is wild. Okay, so Battle of Brilliant Machines, I think a lot of people can wrap their minds around. I actually have a smart home. I have my light switches are all smart switches. My irrigation system is a smart irrigation system. My garage door opener, everything's Wi-Fi connected, and it all provides really interesting pieces of data and insights. I have an Apple Watch, which gives me really cool data on workouts and how I sleep and stuff like that. So I think that's a lot of people are probably more used to and familiar with the concept of brilliant machines. I even on the industrial side, right? I think there are a lot of jet engines, trains, commercial vehicles that have pieces of technology and software in there that give data around how airplanes fly, if there's an issue, self-diagnosing issues. So let's move on to the next one, which is the race for remarkable results. Because that to me is an interesting one, but also a challenging one, especially in the environment that we're in now. So what does it mean to have remarkable results?
Which is about providing service with your machine. That is what remarkable results is all about. Let me give you an example. In the past, suppose a farmer has 1,000 acres, and in the 1,000 acres, there are going to be plants, and sometimes there will be weeds. The farmer has to kill the weeds so that the plants grow. Now, in the past, in the analog world, that service you can provide to the farmer in one of two ways. One way I can provide that service to the farmer is to send hundreds of thousands of people who go row by row by row, look at each plant and determine whether it is a plant or a weed, and then take out the weed. Now, first of all, that kind of human intensive way of doing it, we may not have enough human beings to go around. That is also expensive. That is time consuming. And it is also prone to errors because human beings can get tired and sometimes may miss a weed or miss a plant. The second approach by which you can provide that service is to say, I will send a helicopter and throw herbicide across the 1,000 acres. Instead of sending human beings, I'm going to send a helicopter or a drone and then put herbicide across the 1,000 acres. The problem with this approach is the weed may be only in 10% of the 1,000 acres. Now you're throwing herbicide across 1,000 acres. So that means you're spending 90% more herbicide than is needed. Of course, the 10% weeds are not concentrated in one place. It's distributed. That's why you use a blanket spraying. The second problem is when you do blanket spraying, you can inadvertently kill the plants. Therefore, John Deere has come up with a fusion services, an intelligent product which is using data graph and machine learning. It is called See and Spray. This See and Spray moves at 15 miles per hour. So it'll move at 15 miles per hour, row by row by row. And It has got computer vision just like Tesla. Tesla is based on computer vision. That's all Tesla is. Not LiDAR, they're computer vision. So they have eyes. In Tesla, they have eyes. So the See and Spray has computer vision cameras that are they can take lots and lots of photographs in fraction of a second and process it. And when they take the photograph, they are able to distinguish, because through machine learning, the See and Spray is trained to distinguish weed from plant. So as it is moving, it is taking a photograph of everything that is observing, quickly recognizes this is a weed. Once it recognizes it's a weed, it throws herbicide on the weed without killing the plants. And it moves at 15 miles per hour. So this See and Spray increases customers' productivity. That is why it is a service. Fusion product is about predictive maintenance on the tractor, whereas this is about adding value to the customer.
If you enjoy getting leadership and career advice and trying to figure out how to future-proof your organization, you are not going to want to miss heading over and subscribing to my Substack, which you can do by going to greatleadership.substack.com. We have a community there of tens of thousands of people from around the world, and it's where I share my latest thinking, my best ideas, exclusive interviews with CEOs, in-depth articles and insights that I share, and leadership hacks from some of the world's top leaders and best-selling authors. So if you want to really step up your leadership game, excel in your career, head over to greatleadership.substack.com. You are not going to want to miss this opportunity. That's an interesting example. Are there any others that come to mind as well that, maybe for white collar workers, for knowledge workers, for people who work in the corporate world, as far as how this might impact them when it comes to remarkable results?
Absolutely. In fact, consulting firms provide service. You can create a fusion offering through Gen AI, thereby it is able to take all the consulting you have done across many industries, and when you go to consult for a new client in that industry, it brings all that knowledge using Gen AI and tells them how they should approach this client. You can do it through human beings. Somebody can read all the consulting reports and come up with the same insight, but that's very expensive and very human intensive.
ChatGPT, you can do that. You can make your own ChatGPT based on like previous case studies and works and report that you've done, and it kind of models the way you do that. So that's an interesting way to think about that. And I've tried playing around with ChatGPT as well to kind of model some of those things. There was a recent example of Duolingo as well, of how they're using generative AI for transcription and translation services. I mean, in that case, it's adding value to the business, it's adding value to the customer, but what they did is they ended up laying off a bunch of their workers. So how do you balance the results for the business, the value for the customers, but with the reduction of headcount? Because it does entail some sacrifices, right? I mean, even in the John Deere example, how many farmers used to be out in the field doing the spraying, looking for weeds versus plants. Now it's done by a machine that's going 15 miles an hour. So there's kind of pros and cons to this, I'm assuming, or is it usually just value added in general?
Absolutely, there will be a disruption in jobs. That's what technology does. And that is not a reason not to use technology. And because with every wave of technology, when calculators came, certain people lost jobs.
Yeah.
But you have to think about the nature of job will change. I think the research that I have read indicates almost 80% of the job, at least 10% of what people do will be impacted by AI. Therefore, there will be change. That means I need to rethink how I perform my job, where I can add value. And this would require massive retraining, massive reskilling, upskilling, etc. But this is something, while perhaps the rate at which the job displacements may happen may be quite high, it is not. If you look back in history, every time there was a technology wave, people said, oh, what's going to do? What it did was it creates different kinds of jobs, and people need to retrain to adapt and change. That's what I would say. And that's no different with the current data and AI craze as well.
Yeah, it's the disruption, I think, is something that you can't avoid. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Okay, the next two battlegrounds, we have the showdown of smart systems and then the clash of custom solutions. So a smart system, what's the difference between a smart system and an intelligent machine? And why is smart systems a battleground?
A smart system is a system of machines, because you think about, in intelligent machine, we are talking about a single piece of equipment. You're trying to maintain that at an optimal level. Typically, there are a system of machines a farmer uses. He's not just using tractor. He has got a tractor, a combine, a harvester, a tiller, a planter, etc. Similarly, you think about a building like Burj Khalifa.
Yeah.
Burj Khalifa has air conditioning system, heating system, lighting system, elevators, security system. All of them affect energy use in that building. So if I'm Honeywell, I may be just supplying air conditioning and cooling system to Burj Khalifa. Whereas the fusion system is about putting digital hooks on the lighting system, which I don't supply, elevators, etc., and collecting data from this entire system of systems that are determining the energy use in Burj Khalifa. Therefore, if I am Honeywell, I am of course supplying heating and cooling system, but I am telling Burj Khalifa, I can actually, if you give me permission, I will put digital hooks on your elevators, your lighting system. And they also have occupancy data, particularly in post-COVID times. The entire building is not 100% occupied. And Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world. It has got, I don't know how many, 140 floors with so much space. A lot of them may not be fully utilized. When you have occupancy data coming, I can remotely switch off the air conditioning in a room that is not being used.
Yeah.
How do you do that without this data and AI? You can send a human being up and down in the elevator every 5 minutes to see which room is not occupied and turn off the light and turn down the AC. That's a impractical, inefficient way to do it. Whereas Honeywell, sitting in the US, by just having data and AI, data graph and AI, can remotely control the energy use in Burj Khalifa. That is what fusion systems do, because the weakest part of the system creates the most problem. Therefore, it is not just predictive maintenance on one product, it is about predictive maintenance on the whole system. Because the system efficiency depends on the weakest part. And that's why this is so important.
Okay. And I like the system. I feel this is, we used to call this the Internet of Things, right? It's kind of a similar concept with the Internet of Things, where a bunch of devices talk to each other, and based on the data that those devices collect, it allows you to kind of make decisions, whether it's irrigation or weather patterns, whether it's flight patterns, whether it's traffic, all those things kind of working together. And then the last one is the clash of custom solutions. So what exactly is that?
I think in custom solutions, you start with the customer problem. For instance, a farmer, what is his problem? He wants maximum yield on his farm. And if I am John Deere, I may be supplying equipment to the farmer, but equipment is only 10% of the total cost of the farmer. The other things are seed, fertilizer, weather, herbicide, irrigation system, etc., etc. I don't participate in those. Therefore, a fusion solution starts from the customer and work backwards and says, how do I orchestrate an ecosystem so that I can solve the customer problem? Similarly, customer is facing mobility as a problem. So if I am Uber, I can give you mobility with a transport vehicle like a car. But mobility is broader than that. I also use airplane, I use trains, I use public transportation. That is what Uber One is trying to play in the space of solving the customer problem. Therefore, Uber One now starts to collect product in use data. Every time you fly from Boston to Chicago, you use the Uber One app to buy the air ticket, so they know where you're going. Of course, you call the Uber with the car with the app also. Every time you use public transportation, buy a ticket through Uber One. Every time you take train, you buy ticket through Uber One. And they also already in Uber Eats. Basically, they want to understand the totality of individual's problem and try to solve it. That's what fusion solutions is, where the maximum value you can create.
Okay, so let me just quickly recap these four battlegrounds, and you help me make sure if I got it correctly. So brilliant machines are these individual machines, whether it's a smart car or a tractor, whatever it might be. Remarkable results is ultimately how do we get maximum value from infusing AI and technology into these physical products and services. Smart systems are bringing together multiple different smart machines and smart devices and things like that together. And custom solutions, it seems like, is a little bit of a blending the physical and the digital, multiple systems, AI, software, everything to give maximum value to the customer so that you can, I guess in the case of Uber, get an end-to-end journey of what you need and how you can help the customer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Or did I make a mistake there?
Good summary.
Okay. So obviously in that world, it seems to me that you have to be a different kind of a leader, right? A technology-driven leader. And a lot of leaders are not necessarily comfortable with that. So before we jump into the question on the steps, the four sequential steps that people can use to navigate those four battlefields, I thought we could just briefly talk about the skills that leaders need to possess in order to be able to compete in those battlefields. So when you think about how leadership is changing, what are some of the skills or mindsets that come to mind for you?
I capture that under two words. We need fusion leaders. Fusion leaders are able to manage paradox. Instead of saying, I can do one or the other. No. You have to resolve the paradox. So you have to be physical and digital. You have to be global and local. You have to be centralized and decentralized. You have to think about the future and the present. That is what the skill set you need. That is really, really, really important going forward, is to manage paradoxes. And that is the kind of leaders, not just only at the CEO level. We need to populate them up and down in the organization, because what we are talking about is about strategy.
Yeah.
This is not a technical subject which you can delegate to the IT staff or to the data scientists. This should be owned by the business, owned by people who are making decisions. Therefore, it is very important. It should be led by the CEO, but everybody should develop this fusion leadership mindset. And This also means data should not be in silos. Data should be completely integrated. In many companies, data are kept in different pockets. They don't talk to each other. We need a complete integration of data to be a fusion company.
Yeah, it's challenging, I think, for a lot of leaders out there too, to kind of navigate and embrace some of these skills. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the coming weeks, months, years going down the road. I think there's been a big emphasis on technological fluency for leaders out there. I always say that every leader is a technology-driven leader because every company today is a tech company. So technology is not just an IT thing anymore, it's an everybody thing. So let's transition to the last 15 minutes or so of the show where we talk, it's a section called the Leader's Toolkit. And I wanted to ask you about these 4 sequential steps that people can take to navigate in these battlefields, which are architect, organize, accelerate, and monetize. And in your book, you talk about that this is a cycle that keeps repeating itself with rapid feedback. So walk us through what these 4 steps are, starting off with architect. My conversation with VG continues for subscribers of Great Leadership Plus on Apple Podcasts. And in this bonus conversation, we're going to be talking about the 4 sequential steps that you can implement inside of your organization to compete in those different battlegrounds that we alluded to earlier. The 4 steps are architect, organize, accelerate, and monetize. So if you want to learn more about each one of those steps, how to apply them, make sure to subscribe to Great Leadership Plus, again, on Apple Podcasts. When you do that, you'll get a weekly bonus episode as well as ad-free listening. And if you want to get notified whenever new episodes are live, head over to greatleadership.substack.com, enter your email there. And if you want to grab a copy of my new book, head over to leadwithvulnerability.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody else who you would like to see become a better leader. That's it for me. I'll see you next week.